Now, on Saturday, the Information Regulator met with TransUnion Credit Bureau representatives to discuss recent reports of the hacking of its IT systems. A criminal hacking group allegedly based in Brazil has claimed responsibility, declaring to have accessed the personal information of 54 million consumers, totaling approximately 4 terabytes of data. The alleged extortion demand has been reported to be between 223 billion and 225 billion rand. TransUnions says it will not pay the extortion demand. Joining us to discuss the outcomes of the meeting is Advocate Collen Weapond from the Information Regulator of South Africa. Advocate, good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Let's just start with your your initial reaction when you heard about this huge security breach.
Good morning, Seho, and good morning to your viewers. The regulator was quite shocked. You should understand that we had a data breach of Experian in 2020, where in excess of 20 million records of consumers were compromised or data subjects. So we thought, that there are adequate measures, in the credit bureau space, and hence we were very concerned when we received the report, obviously triggering us to actually, considering the report from or the notification or the letter from TransUnion, and also to see what the root cause of that specific security compromise was. When it comes to the outcome of the meeting, we were concerned about the very reporting that TransUnion has provided, in particular the fact that the report was not complete to us. Secondly, the fact that the data subjects or consumers who are affected that needs to be notified, and also the manner in which they need to be notified, as well as the location of the threat actor, because we are not yet clear, gathering from our talks with the TransUnion about where this threat actor's location is. Is it Brazil or Europe? And then also the number of affected data subjects. But there is an investigation underway, and we were promised by TransUnion that communication to affected data subjects should be done on or about Tuesday, which will be the 22nd of March.
So what seems to have happened in this case, Advocate?
Yes, so what we gather from our discussions with TransUnion is that a threat actor accessed the security information of one of the customers of TransUnion, and they then used that information, which is an unauthorized access in terms of Section 19(1), to gain access to the systems of TransUnion, particularly the automotive type of information, which is vehicle-related information, applications and considerations of people buying vehicles, etc.
So from what you then, the conversations that you had with TransUnion, what action really will you be taking as the Information Regulator at this stage?
That's a very good question. So first of all, we need to consider the first and full report that we've asked TransUnion to provide to the Information Regulator. As soon as the regulator receives the full report, we will analyze the report, assess the risk. Very important, we need to know the extent and the impact of the data breach. How many people are affected by this data breach, or consumers or data subjects? And as soon as we have that information, then the regulator can then plan for its next step. It can either be that the regulator institute a full investigation in terms of Section 79 of the Protection of Personal Information Act, or it can go the assessment route in terms of Section 89(1) of OPIA. But very importantly, we also then need to know what type of manner are we going to use to communicate to the data subjects who are affected? That's the primary concern of the information regulator, so that we ensure that they don't suffer any financial loss or any other loss as a result of the information being compromised, and that would then be the focus. And if the regulator takes either the assessment route or the investigation route, the information regulator will communicate such to TransUnion and then ensure that we also have the team on board to actually conduct or execute that specific investigation or assessment. And very importantly, the information regulator will communicate with the public every step of the way, so that we ensure that they are kept in the loop and that all the stakeholders and role players are well informed about the regulator's intention in steps.
What recourse then do the affected people have?
Yes, that's very important. So they can lodge a complaint with the information regulator, which will obviously result in us investigating it. That will be in terms of Section 74(1). But they can also, institute civil litigation, and then Section 99 of the Protection of Personal Information Act gives the regulator an opportunity to join in such a civil action. So those are manners in which they can then ensure that they also have some recourse to this suffered data breach. But it's very important that we wait for the full notification to the information regulator. That will now be in terms of Section 22(1), and that then allows the regulator to analyze the extent to which the data breach has occurred, who are the affected parties, and what intermeasures has TransUnion put in place, and how have they secured the personal information of data subjects in their possession or under their control in terms of Section 19(1) of the Protection of Personal Information.
Now, the concerning thing about this, Advocate, is that this stolen information could actually be used for illegal activities, isn't it so? Especially going into the future, even after this incident has happened, long after this incident has happened. So what do you think that people can really do to protect themselves?
Thank you so much, Tseho. So the first step, and I think there is some experts that have been, like Manny van Stalbeek, conducting interviews. It is to ensure in the short term or the immediate steps not to verify your information, over the phone without being 100% sure that you're speaking to the correct source of the inquiry, but also not to have your PIN exposed or actually providing more detail, but to also then ensure that you continuously update your security PINs or change them. And obviously you also need to then ensure, and if the case, if there's a case to be made, if there's a concern, maybe to try to change your username, and also all other information that relates to your security, and also to ensure that you continuously monitor your own access, and also ensure that you continuously engage the service providers where, for instance, you have made applications, for vehicle finance, that will maybe and largely be the automotive industry. As far as we know, that is the affected server, and that is in country, which means it's in South Africa, and we need to be absolutely sure that all people who has, in the past year, 2, or in the past 5 years, applied for vehicle finance, are taking the necessary steps to ensure their information is not further compromised.
Now, following this meeting that you had with TransUnion Credit Bureau representatives yesterday, what is then going to be the way forward from now on? And how sure are we that, the consumer's information will remain intact?
Thank you, Tseho. So the chairperson of the Information Regulator, Advocate Pensi Tlakula, provided detailed and concrete direction. And the first step is that TransUnion must ensure that they report in terms of the requirements of Section 22 when they do a notification of a security compromise to the Information Regulator. And secondly, we wrote to TransUnion to actually ask them to respond to a detailed list of questions that now triggers Section 19.1 as well as Section 19.3. And those sections usually refers to the security measures that are currently in place and the interim measures that were taken. The chairperson then also asked that a full notification as well as the manner in which we're going to communicate to the affected data subjects must be put together by the 22nd, which is Tuesday. And then the third step will be for the Information Regulator to take the information that TransUnion has provided, to have a special meeting to consider the effects and also the way forward. And as I've said earlier, it might be that the regulator decides to institute a criminal action, to institute criminal action by making use of what we call our local enforcement agencies. But very importantly, there was also communication or discussion in our meeting that because of the fact that TransUnion understands that a threat actor might be located outside of South Africa, that they've asked international law enforcement agencies to also investigate the matter. But we also want our law enforcement agencies to be involved, to play an active role and to also appreciate the risk. And we have a standing relationship and arrangements with the Hawks, specifically the cybersecurity investigators, to consider any requests from our side. And then lastly, if we are satisfied with the information that was provided, we will then look at either investigating from our side the systems of TransUnion, but also maybe we'll do an assessment. And either way, if the regulator finds that TransUnion systems were insufficiently secured or not appropriately secured, there are what we would call a route in terms of Section 107, where we will now be able to fine, raise a fine of up to 10 million, or there can be a sanction of imprisonment, or it can be a combination of both, depending on the severity of the compromise and also the systems of TransUnion and the report that we receive.
Did TransUnion give you any indication that they would be moving closer to ensure that this does not happen again?
Yes, of course. One of the ways in which Transnet have communicated with us in the meeting was to say that they have isolated that server so that they minimize the risk of further compromise within their systems. But very importantly, you would understand that the regulator remains concerned, because once the information has left TransUnion, it can resurface on the dark web, it can resurface on Telegram, on WhatsApp, and all other mediums or internet or platforms. And that is the major concern of the Information Regulator, and we are now trying to see how best we increase our monitoring capabilities and ensure continuous monitoring. But we will also provide further direction as per the chairperson's concern, Advocate Pensi Tlakula, about how TransUnion should ensure that their systems are adequately safeguarded against further compromise and against the reoccurrence of the same compromise.